Welcome everyone to this next session. We're going to be talking about building a successful sales coaching program here in this panel today. We have an awesome lineup and really excited to go into this session here. We have two brilliant panelists. Like I mentioned, we're going to kick it over first to Jeff. If you want to introduce yourself for the panel, for the audience quickly, and just give a bit of background on you and your coaching background.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, Daniel. Hey, everyone. Great to be here today. So quick background on me. 20 years in the tech space. I've sat at all sides of the table as an agency leader, buyer, experiencing, sales as a buyer. Spent, about a decade at Google as a frontline sales leader, and then 5 years in sales enablement at Google, including building their global sales coaching program. So excited to bring that experience here today. Kira, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everybody. I'm Kira. I lead sales enablement for the Talent Solutions part of LinkedIn. I have been in sales and sales enablement for about 15 years, predominantly LinkedIn and advertising agency world before that. And outside of LinkedIn, I am an ICF certified coach. So I've definitely melded that personal interest of mine with my job at LinkedIn to create what we have is today our sales coaching program. So excited to talk about it.
I love that. Two sort of really great backgrounds to have to discuss this today. Like I mentioned at the top, we're going to be talking about sort of sales coaching and building a sales coaching program. But to sort of set the scene and kick it off a little bit, we'll kick it to you, Jeff, first. Why is sort of sales coaching more critical than ever in sort of today's selling environment? There's been a lot of sort of hurdles been thrown up in recent years, sort of looking big picture, a bit more foundational. What are you seeing? Why is sales coaching even more important than it sort of was before?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying it's, in my opinion, it's always been important. It's just becoming increasingly important in the sense that, again, like if I go back to like the comment I made about sitting at all sides of the table, if we're really honest about it, a lot of cases, sellers still, in my opinion, come fairly unprepared to really important meetings and really important engagements where a buying decision could potentially be on the line. And I experienced that a lot as a buyer. And then the sales side, saw that quite a bit too, where even if you're a very experienced seller, you go into these conversations and you haven't necessarily worked out all the kinks necessarily inside the room, behind the curtain, if you will. And then you think about, the current environment we're in now, the pressure is rising, do more with less. You have the, proliferation of AI inside of that as well. And people thinking about what does that mean for sales teams? And for me, it really comes down to like, sales teams need to be more prepared and deliver more effectively than ever before, right? And what coaching brings to the table in doing that is you have a, kind of psychologically safe space with an expert. Kira, to your point about being ICF certified, I am as well. Like I'm so passionate about this space, and it gives you an opportunity really to kind of work through those kinks, if you will, and navigate what's going to be an effective discovery conversation, or if you think you're going to face a certain objection, how can you get coaching on those things so that you're better prepared well in advance of the conversation that you're going to actually have. In most cases, sellers end up unfortunately getting the coaching and practice in front of their customer, and then getting that feedback afterwards. So I would say those are the big pieces, but pressure really is rising at higher levels. Companies, especially if they're public or want to go IPO, still want to see numbers grow. So the challenge is we've got to show up better than we ever have before.
Over me?
Yeah, Kira.
Amazing. It's funny. I think that in preparation, every time I am preparing for one of these, I try to refresh myself on, what's like the newest content out there on the subject matter. And sales coaching is always a funny one because anytime I find myself like listening to a podcast about sales coaching, I find that people just jump straight in and it's really like a generalized conversation about sales, not really about sales coaching. And so I actually think that maybe a more foundational question before I answer the one that you asked, Daniel, is just like, what is sales coaching? And like, how do you define what that even is? Because I find that it looks different at different companies for different people. And so not to take us off script, but I actually think that is perhaps like the place that I will start, which is just like, what's my philosophy on what sales coaching even is? And then now, why does it matter more than ever. And really, like, sales training is just a knowledge transfer, right? Like, sales coaching is how do you take that knowledge and wrap it with skills and application and behavior change to make sure that whatever you're learning is actually translating into different inputs that drive different outputs. And sales coaching is the art of getting there. And how do you ask really great questions of your sales rep in order to help them find their own path forward and improve their performance. And I find that it's like turned into a bit of a buzz phrase, like sales coaching, but like people don't actually like pause to think about like, what does that really mean? And what does a great coach look like? So I'm sure we'll get there later in the conversation, but I think that it's always a good place to start, which is just like defining what you're talking about and what actually is sales coaching itself. Why does it matter more than ever? +1, Jeff, to everything you just shared. I also think that right now AI is changing. Obviously, it's changing the way that every single person in the world does their jobs faster than they can even blink or think. And for me, it's actually really exciting because I think AI actually gives us tools to be more effective coaches now than we've ever been able to be before. And so it's not just that the world around us is changing and so we have to show up differently, but it's how can we leverage how the world is changing to be even more effective as sales coaches in our role. So we'll get into the nitty gritty during this, but it's an exciting time to be in this function.
I love that. I love that sort of business insights. And I'd love to sort of, like you said, dive into the nitty gritty a little bit. In terms of effective sales coaching, now that the scene is set, I'd love to just throw it over maybe to you, Jeff, again first, in terms of when you think about effective sales coaching, what comes to mind? What are the sort of the key principles that you sort of think maybe even are forgotten by people? Kira touched on that as well, about people not having sort of the set definition. What is effective sales coaching, I guess, is the best way to phrase that question for you, Jeff.
I love that. And it's a good opportunity to build on what Kira just shared, which is like, let's like get real and understand foundationally what sales coaching actually is. So if you think about sales coaching or coaching in general, there's all these different kind of misconceptions, different connotations of what coaching is, right? You can think about coaching in sports, and it might be you thinking about the coach, yelling at you for not doing the right thing, running the right route, shooting the ball, whatever that is. You can also confuse it in the professional space, right? Someone might think that they're coaching, but really what they're doing is like telling someone what to do. So I think an important distinction, if we take a big step back and think about what coaching actually is, coaching is anchored very heavily in curiosity, in active listening, and making sure the person you're coaching or the team you're coaching, the agenda is theirs and you're helping them identify and proverbially unlock the thing that they're trying to achieve, right? So then when you attach the sales lens to it, the outcome often is, how do they drive a more effective meeting with this customer that they have in a couple of days or whatever that is. But the coach is not there to tell them what to do. The coach is not there to say, remove slide 5 or whatever, right? The coach is there to help them understand what are they trying to focus on? What are the big pitfalls that maybe they need to work their way through? And I know we'll get into frameworks and stuff like that in here as well, but help guide them through that conversation. And then as you listen through that, ask some other questions, play back some observations that help them identify actually the path they need to go down, not necessarily just telling them what they should do. And that's been, in my opinion, one of the biggest things we had to talk about when we built the sales coaching program at Google. Was there was this question of like, well, that's the manager's job. So like, why do we need this coaching team, right? And the reality was, I said, well, we agree with that, but 2 things are also true. One, you have a lot of managers that will say they don't have time to coach. And then 2, you have managers who say they are coaching, but they're actually not. They're not doing it correctly, right? So for us, it was like, how do we make sure we've instilled that in everybody? And then we have a clear common language and way, if you will, to do it. And then have, some experts who are also supporting that experience and then helping up level the managers as well. So maybe I'll pause there. I'll kick it to Kira. Would love your thoughts and build on that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just shared, Jeff. And I think to double down on one point you made, and then I'll add, is effective coaching is letting go of problem solving, right? Like you have to first understand that you're not the person with the best answer or the right answer, and like genuinely believe that. And to like, that's easier said than done, to be honest. And so I think that it all starts there, is how do you actually like figure out what the right questions are to ask versus have the solution to those questions. I think some other points I would add are like excellent sales coaching is consistent. Like it happens regularly. It's embedded into processes and workflows. It's not like a one-off event or occasion. 2 is it's personalized. So it's personalized to the individual you are coaching. Like what are their gaps to goal? What are their strengths you're trying to build on? It's not a one size fits all script. 3 is it's tied to real work. So like it should be rooted in real deals, real opportunities, not based in theory. And then lastly, I would say like it invites reflection and drives action forward. So it like leads the coachee or your sales rep to their aha moment, if you will, of like what is blocking them and what they need to do differently to move forward.
I love that. And one thing I want to quickly jump back to actually is Jeff, you mentioned about sort of the managers, and you talked a bit about how the coach should act, but maybe I want to throw back to Kira, get your thoughts on this as well, in terms of what role, how do you get that manager to sort of play that role? How much coaching is done by the manager? Where does the sort of coaching start? Who does it come from? Because I think that's maybe a misunderstanding that some people have as well, is how much who gets to be involved in each side.
Yeah. Happy to start, and then Kira, feel free to build on this one. I know we have opinions on this as well. So again, like the manager is responsible still for coaching. That is very, very much true. The challenge is making sure that they have a proper investment in coaching, so that they know they have a method, if you will, of doing it, and you can help instill that in them, right? So if I use the Google sales coaching program as the example, yes, there were dedicated coaches in the program, but each dedicated coach had a cohort of managers, and then we built from there to train them on how to also be effective coaches for their team. And then they often actually coached other teams, so that you had still kind of that continual psychologically safe space of like, let me have someone else come in who might have a different perspective or might not be so attached to that deal that they can actually coach me through it versus risk directing me potentially through it. So that was a really important piece, is just making sure, yes, the manager is still very responsible, but the frontline managers, like they're in a squeeze. Like they've got a lot going on, right? What I will tell you as a former frontline sales manager, the more you lean into coaching and the more you do coaching effectively, it actually frees up your time, because you can get more curious, ask more questions, not feel like you've got to hold on to every problem that's brought to you. Kira, going back to your point, and you actually open the space and help that person or the team work their way through those things, and not feel like you got to attach yourself to like telling them what to do all the time. And when you tell them what to do all the time, usually it's kind of like feeding the bear at the zoo. They just come back with more problems, right? And you keep feeding them. So I'll stop there, and Kira would love your thoughts too.
Yeah, I love the point you just made about, I think it's myth busting, right? Where it's like the number one objection from leaders is always, I don't have enough time. No matter what it is, sales coaching or otherwise, no matter what you're trying to do. And so, sales coaching, I genuinely believe, is that one skill that you can really invest in that frees up more space. So I really want to emphasize that point. I think, Daniel, I think one part of your question is like, what's on the sales manager? And I'm going to actually answer that with what isn't on the sales manager. I think one of the things that we have tried hard to do at LinkedIn, and Jeff, I'd be curious if it's similar at Google, is like a lot of coaching responsibility lies on the coachee, not the coach. And in fact, I would argue the majority lies on the coachee versus the coach. And that is why it frees up space and time for the coach. So one of the things that we've tried to, build into the DNA is like, if you are the rep or the coachee in this scenario, like it is your responsibility to, one, come prepared to those conversations. Like what is the deal or the opportunity that you want to work on? What is the skill gap that you're looking to make progress against, et cetera. And then at the end of that coaching conversation, we actually leave it to our reps to document, like, okay, here's my takeaway. Here's the action I'm committed to taking. Here's the skill that I'm focused on driving. And then they have to actually document what happens between that conversation and then the next one. And so really, it's like a lot of the responsibility lies on the rep, more so than the manager itself. So happy to elaborate on that later, but I actually just I wanted to plug that philosophy.
Yeah, I love that. Real quick, Daniel, before you go to the next question, I will just take a moment to kind of bold and emphasize that. Not only is that true, during the time at Google building the sales coaching program, but now that I'm out running my own business in this space and have talked to a lot of different organizations and coached a lot of different organizations around this, it's the same everywhere, right? The reality is the manager feels a ton of pressure to do a lot of things and to have all the answers and solve all the problems and all of that, when in reality, if they were effective coaches and became more effective at coaching, they wouldn't have that proverbial burden as much anymore, because really at the end of the day, the coachee, the rep, the team, et cetera, the accountability needs to be much more on them actually, right? Yes, the manager and leader is going to hold the overarching number and feel responsibility, but it's how they actually unlock that, if you will, for their team is what's going to make everything different. And the reps, really, for them, it helps them develop and grow and use their own critical thinking and have autonomy and trust and all of that to go and be empowered to go do the work, right? So in a lot of cases, I think managers think they're doing their team a favor by saying, oh yeah, I've dealt with this situation 20 times, just go do this. Or why didn't you talk to this person? Or go talk to this person, whatever that might be. You're actually doing your team yourself and your team a massive disservice by doing that.
I love that. I love that perspective shift. I'm sure there'll be a couple of light bulbs maybe going off to people listening as well on that. To sort of follow up in terms of, you mentioned earlier, Jeff, as well, in terms of frameworks and models, I'd love to sort of lean on both of you to sort of, do you have a sort of set framework or model that you use every time? Is it sort of dependent on the situation? How do you, I guess, structure the sort of coaching program so that you sort of have a repeatable method to go to and can use time and time again?
Yeah. Kira, do you want to go first this time? I'll give you the
Sure.
first crack.
Yeah, I'm happy to. We love a framework. So I think there's frameworks on frameworks. There's frameworks for the architect of a coaching journey, and then there's the frameworks for the conversation itself. So I'll start there. We use Grow. It's pretty industry standard. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I like it because I think it really actually does just harness all of the essence of the important factors of coaching into one model. And so, goal, what is it that you're actually aiming to accomplish? Reality is what's actually happening and what obstacles are in your way of achieving that goal. O is options. So what are let's just spitball ideas. What are the things you can try? And then W is will, what are you actually going to be committed to doing differently moving forward? And I like it because people that know nothing about coaching, that tends to resonate with them, where it doesn't have to follow that formula exactly. I think that it can be really organic in the conversation itself. But as long as you accomplish talking about those 4 elements in the conversation, then that's the essence of coaching. So that's what we use in terms of the coaching framework itself. I don't know, Jeff, but what do you guys use?
Yeah. Google also uses Grow. Look, I would say the thing that's with Grow, that's probably the most commonly used one. It's the simplest one, I think, to work your way through. If you want to set low barrier of entry around going through a coaching conversation, Kira, going back to your point, is what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve here? What's your current state? What's your reality? You can move into the options, and then, what will you do? Get to an action. I will say one thing I think is missing from the Grow model, maybe worth the group thinking about, is you have to make sure you're digging into what actually needs to change, right? So like coaching is all about change. Something needs a shift or change, right? So if it's goal, reality, inside of that current state, you start digging into that, you start working your way through the options, then you start getting into the behavior change thing. Like what's actually the issue we've got to work through here? When you flow through the grow model, in a lot of cases that shows up in the O, when you get into the options, you might learn in that of like, oh, like actually you need to go back to discovery. You don't know enough, right? Or, oh, you keep running up against this particular, pricing objection, whatever it is. Then you can go, okay, it sounds like the coaching needs to move towards an objection handling state. So however you flow through that, whether you use grow, I've created one that I use for clients I work with, which is very similar. It's called rises, reality, ideal state, what needs a shift, what's your evolved point of view now based on the conversation, and then what steps do you take. So it's similar, but it really gets into like, where are you now? What do you need to get to? What needs a change to get you there? What are your options? How are you going to explore that? And then what are you going to actually do to get them to accountability?
That's awesome. I like the sort of but having sort of both perspectives, little tweaks here and there that people sort of use depending on their situation as well. One thing I really want to make sure we have the time to hit is coaching culture. I'd love to sort of hear your thoughts on, I guess, what a good coaching culture looks like, but maybe even from the perspective of why are so many organizations lacking a good coaching culture? Sort of what are the problems that are sort of in the way of creating a sort of good coaching culture? I'll throw it to the floor, whoever wants to sort of jump in and pick that up. But I think coaching culture is such an important aspect. I'd love to sort of hear your guys' view on that.
I mean, I have a thought that spurs. Let's bounce off each other, Kira. But I'll give you like my immediate reaction to the question, which is like, culture requires commitment and consistency. So you can throw a lot of other C words out there. The C culture word gets thrown around like, do we have a good culture, bad culture, toxic culture, positive coaching culture, whatever. The reality is like, culture is created by the behaviors, right? So if there isn't like absolute commitment and consistency to the behavior, you won't create the culture. And most organizations don't. I would just be like pretty blunt and say, most organizations don't have a consistent commitment to a coaching culture. So then as a result, they go, oh, we trained all the managers on coaching. We taught them the grow model. Yeah, we're good. Check. Like, no, that's not enough. Doing that one time, they'll go back to their 100 emails, and I guarantee you I'll come back and ask them in 3 months, what's the model? How many times have you used it? And in most cases, those things have fallen off. So if you really want a coaching culture or a sales culture or whatever culture it is you want, in my opinion, it requires a combination of commitment. We are committed to doing this, and we will do it consistently.
Yeah, I'll build. So I think 1 is it's expected, 2 is it's enabled, 3 is that it's embedded, and last is that it's celebrated. So it's funny, right? Like we spend so much time observing reps and customer interactions to like dissect, are they able to have a successful customer engagement? We spend a lot less time inspecting the one-on-one dynamic between a sales manager and a sales rep to see if the manager is effective at navigating the conversation with their rep. And so I think that that's like one major shift to take for this culture to be successful. 1 is that I always say you have to inspect what you expect, right? You can't just like train a bunch of managers on sales coaching and then like, wish that it happens and hope it happens. You actually have to see that it's happening. And so, there's a lot of ways you can do that. Some are more scalable, some are less scalable. Less scalable, obviously, is having like actual coaches observe one-on-ones between reps and managers and then coach the coach afterwards. And now, like, going back to the point I was making at the opening of the call, it's like tech is allowing us to do things at scale now that we never could before. So how can you take technologies like Gong or Teams or whatever, Zoom, whatever it is, and actually, rather than just focus on recording and analyzing a customer interaction, how do you use that same technology, but apply it internally? How do you observe what's happening at scale between sales reps and sales leaders? And how do you actually analyze the skill, like the actual coaching skill set of your leadership team, to tweak and improve your internal programs the same way that you would use to tweak or improve the customer narrative? So yeah, it's built into performance expectations. It's like, you know, I just want to double down on that first one I said, which is it's expected. Like, coaching has to be a skill and a behavior that you actually measure and observe, and it's built into leadership expectations and performance expectations for your sales leadership. It starts there.
I love that. That's awesome. Jeff, did you have anything else to add in there?
No, that's fantastic.
Amazing. That actually, I'm really glad, Kira, that you mentioned it. You mentioned the tech, and I think we'd be doing the audience a disservice if we didn't talk a little bit about tech in you know, we're in 2025 now, right? With AI, where are you sort of seeing the biggest applications? Like, where are you sort of, I guess, most excited that you can sort of leverage, whether it be sort of an AI-driven technology or just technology in general? Where are you sort of seeing the most applications, sort of get the most out of coaching and support managers, support reps, whoever it might be in that sort of coaching journey?
I'm happy to start this one. I'll start by saying I think we're like at the tip of the iceberg, right? Like, I feel like every day I wake up and there's a different platform with a different use case. And so I don't know if Jeff, your feeling is slightly overwhelmed as I am, but it's just like you drink from a fire hose, like on an hourly basis almost right now, I feel like, in the world of AI. I think, so one, I won't repeat what I just mentioned, but I think there's tech that you can use to observe manager rep interactions the same way you would use to observe rep customer interactions, and how can you apply that internally? I think there's a lot of use cases for that. I think that the thing that I've been most excited about in the last year or so is just the evolution and the intelligence around like customer simulation technology, and specifically, again, how do you apply that in a different scenario? So I'll be explicit here. Hyperbound is one that comes to mind, right? So, but there's a lot of them out there right now. It's like you can train an AI bot to be a customer. You can train them to be a difficult customer. You can train them to, you know, come to your reps with most common objections you can think of. And it's wild how smart this technology has gotten. I think a year ago, I was like messing around with it. I'm like, this just like doesn't feel real enough, to be frank. And now I'm like, oh my God, is that a real person on the other end? It's just nuts how much it's improved. And that's great, right? There's like an clear application for that for rep practice. How do you practice having these customer engagements, and how do you get coaching from these AI bots on the other end to improve? But then again, we actually have taken that same technology and leveraged it for internal use cases. So like actually training the AI to be a really difficult rep, not a really difficult customer. And we actually now use that technology, or are about to start using that technology. We've done it in some pilots for managers to practice coaching conversations in the context of one-on-ones, deal reviews, forecasting calls, et cetera, with a rep on the other end, not a customer on the other end. So I think a lot of this is like, how do you take, there's so much rep customer tech out there, but how do you take that and like apply it into a different setting and context, because you can easily. And I think that's underutilized.
Yeah, I love that. Great. That's a great example. We could probably do a whole separate webinar getting into all the tech and all the different ways the tech can be used. So I'll try to keep it high level here. But building on what Kira shared, you know, what I try to remind people is like, you know, we've done a lot of talks on just like AI and, you know, getting this whole like, is AI going to take my job and also these other things. And I think we've got to like move the conversation beyond like AI is here. It's not going away. It's moving very quickly. What it does today is nothing compared to what it'll probably do, you know, months from now, a year from now. Right. So as a, you know, leadership team, as a rep, as a sales leader, you just think through like, how can it make us better? Like, what are some things that it can take off our plate, or frankly do that we could have never done anyways? Like, the reality is in a coaching context, you know, I'm one person. I can't coach thousands and thousands and thousands of people on demand all the time across the world. Technology can. right? So, and again, promise this is not a promotional piece that we're doing for the panel, but playing off of some different technologies out there, like I've done a lot of work with Udly as an example, and similar, you can apply these different scenarios and allow the reps to get practice in a safe space with AI on a specific situation for a customer, or a sales leader can practice a coaching conversation with their rep so they get better at the coaching before they actually do the real coaching with the rep. And it gives you just more reps and more opportunity, and it's there for you. It's simple, scalable, repeatable, on demand when you need it. And those are things that we couldn't have done otherwise, right? So I think some of that is just like embrace what it unlocks for you that maybe you couldn't have done before. And then how does it just make your job better? In a lot of cases, because it can capture call transcripts and things of that nature, each and every time, if you embrace that, you can go, okay, after this call, here's some feedback I got, what went well, maybe what I could have done differently or better. And then that helps you develop and grow. It's just like a really good co-pilot for you. And then there's so much more to it. So maybe I'll just stop there and just say, embrace AI for the things it can help you do better in your role, and maybe the things that it does that you couldn't have done otherwise.
Could I add one thing to that, Daniel, before we go to the next question? I think one of the biggest, I don't know if it's myths to bust, or AI alone does not create outsized performance. People using AI effectively does. And so I just want to underscore that, because to your point, Jeff, I think there's a lot of fear out there at the moment of AI replacing us or taking our jobs. And I don't think that's the right mindset to have. I think it's how can you leverage this to be that much better at your job that much faster. And it's the people that approach things with that mindset that are already being successful and will continue to be successful. And so AI is only as intelligent as the human who's prompting it, right? And yeah. I think I made this point is when we were prepping for this meeting or meeting each other for the first time last week, which is there's a lot of it's pretty meta, right? Where it's all coaching is the art of asking the right question, in my opinion. I mean, there's more to it, but that's if you had to synthesize the heart of what coaching is, that's what coaching is. And same with AI. I'm sure that we've all been, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever your AI buddy is that you're using, sometimes you ask it a question, you're like, that is not helpful. And it's well, it's not helpful because you didn't ask the right question. And so actually training ourselves to be the most curious versions of ourselves, the best question askers that we can be, that's how you're effective with AI. That's how you're effective at coaching. That's probably how you're effective at life at home with your spouse or your children or anything else. So it's just be more curious, ask better questions. I guess I'll leave it at that.
That is real quick, and then Daniel, we'll throw it back to you. That is so good. I'll use maybe a quick analogy for people to think about this, right? So AI to me is very similar, but maybe on a crazy 10x scale to when the first smartphones came out, when the first iPhone came out. I still remember, not to age myself on this, I remember when it came out, and I remember what people did with it when it first came out, because apps didn't really exist yet. You had to pinch and scroll and move on the web page. It wasn't super useful. So people did really silly things with it, which is download apps that look at this, I can turn the thing and it pours the glass or whatever. It was really silly stuff. So, similar with AI, not say it's silly, but it starts very basic. People just don't know how to prompt it yet. So a lot of people might just use it to rewrite an email or ask it very simple questions. And the reality is it can do way more. I think people will adapt over time. The technology will get better, and then we will also get better at how to use the technology, and we will eventually kind of catch up to that and better utilize it. But it's a very similar kind of dynamic, a thing that didn't exist before. We're just trying to adjust to how to use it. We might start with some silly, basic foundational things or try to avoid it and think we don't need it. And then before you know it, we can't live without it.
I love the anecdote. I remember the app that you're talking about. Silly is definitely the right word for it. It's really like that. We're coming up to time, unfortunately. So as much as it pains me to say it, we are going to have to sort of jump to you guys for some final thoughts, closing thoughts that you want to sort of leave with the audience before we wrap up. I guess, is there sort of a golden nugget of advice you have, a sort of key takeaway that each of you have for the audience that you'd love for them to sort of take back to their organization, take back to sort of their personal sort of approach to coaching. How do you want them to sort of take something away from the really great conversation we've had today?
I mean, I'll jump in here and just say, like, I'm going to throw the gauntlet down a little bit on this audience, depending on what role you're in. If you don't have a coaching program set up in the organization, like, it's a massive, massive mess. There's so much. Go ask ChatGPT if you want, or whatever AI tool you prefer, on the impact of coaching, how many leaders actually effectively coach, and then the impact when they do. It's over and over and over. The data says much higher quota attainment, much higher retention of sales reps, much higher confidence levels. You know, we saw massive increases in customer satisfaction, meeting effectiveness, multiple signature wins in the 6-7 figure plus range from the coaching program. If you do not have a coaching program or coaching culture, and we can talk about what that is more, I would encourage you strongly to, like, prioritize that and put that in your plans, because there's a huge missed opportunity from a revenue standpoint if you don't.
Yeah, I'd echo that. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And maybe I'll end with where I began, which is I do see a lot of companies say that they have a sales coaching program. And when I, like, peel back the onion, it's not a sales coaching program. It's just teaching managers how to be super reps and solve other people's problems. And, you know, it's just very focused on, like, the sales 101 and deal velocity and what's the math behind the conversion rates that you need to hit, blah, 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 blah. That isn't sales coaching. Yes, you need all of that. And it's like you apply all of that knowledge within the context of your sales coaching. But I think, like, really truly understanding what coaching is and how it applies in a sales context and a sales operating rhythm is where it begins. And I actually think that that's where most companies tend to, like, miss the mark. And when you miss the mark, you know, at that level, you tend to go off course versus, like, focus on the thing that matters. So I think it's, like, to summarize, one is you have to do it. And two is, like, do it right and, like, actually understand what coaching really is and sales coaching is, and really build that muscle of asking thoughtful questions, figuring out what the options are, like, challenging people to do things differently, and then holding them accountable to doing those things differently. So I guess I'll end there.
I love that too. Really sort of amazing final closing pieces of thoughts. And I think on that note, to say thank you to both Kira and Jeff. I think that conversation could have went on for another hour, 2 hours. There's so much good insights in there. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. So thank you both for taking the time to do this and sharing all of that with the audience. And thank you to the audience for tuning in as well. Hopefully there was a wealth of insights in there to take back, start building sort of the pieces. Like Jeff said, get that sort of sales coaching program into your organization if it's not there already. If you do have a sort of fledgling one, start adding in sort of more pieces. So thank you both again for taking the time. This was really awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice.
And thanks everyone that joined.